Today, we're going to dive into the incredible story of Africa's food systems. It's a journey that spans thousands of years, and it's been shaped by ancient wisdom, colonial disruption, and, this immense modern complexity. So let's get right into it.
Right from the start, let's just put this on the table. When we talk about Africa's food systems, we are not just talking about challenges. We are, in fact, talking about one of the single biggest opportunities for growth, innovation, and prosperity on the continent today. It's huge.
Okay, so to really get a handle on this opportunity, we first need to understand what we're actually talking about. Because, trust me, it's so much more than just what happens on a farm.
So, what even is a food system? Well, think of it as the entire network, that really complex journey that our food takes from the soil all the way to our plate. It's this giant web connecting people, processes, and even the places where we buy our food. And what's so fascinating is just how vast this network is. It's not a simple straight line. It's a dynamic, living system. You've got the farmers, of course, but also the traders who buy from them, the trucks and transporters who move the goods, the folks who process it, the markets where it's all sold, and then us, the people who eat it. And holding it all together, you've got policies, financial systems, roads, and even our own culture. All right, to understand the system we have today, we've got to go back in time. So let's start with Chapter 1. The original indigenous food systems that nourished the continent for thousands and thousands of years. I mean, we are talking about a history with incredibly deep roots here. Over millennia, there was this slow, gradual shift from hunting and gathering that led to some really sophisticated and resilient food systems. These weren't just simple farms, they were entire ecosystems, built on crops like sorghum and millet that could thrive in tough conditions. They were perfectly adapted to their local environments.
And this is where their genius really shines through. They were circular, so animal manure would fertilize the crops, and then the crop leftovers would feed the animals. Absolutely nothing was wasted. And they were also deeply social. The knowledge of which seeds to plant and when, that was passed down through generations. Local markets were built on relationships and trust, not just faceless transactions.
But then came a period of profound change. Chapter 2 isn't about that slow evolution. It's about a really rapid and fundamental restructuring. And it was driven entirely by outside forces.
So here's the most critical point. The whole purpose of the system shifted. Agriculture was completely reoriented, away from feeding local communities and towards producing cash crops, things like coffee, cocoa, and cotton, all for export to global markets. The fundamental goal just completely changed.
Let's just break this down for a second to see how deep these changes went. The goal shifted from community survival to export and commerce. Those diverse, traditional staples like millet and sorghum, they were pushed aside in favor of cash crops. Control moved out of local hands and became dictated by the demands of faraway markets. And this even changed what people ate, with diets becoming way more reliant on a much narrower range of foods, like maize.
And that brings us to today. Chapter 3 is all about complexity, where these historical layers, the heritage system, and the disruption, they all exist at the same time. And this is so key. It's not a story of a broken system, but a deeply layered one. This really captures the reality of it perfectly. Those indigenous farming practices, they haven't disappeared. The infrastructure and trade patterns from the colonial era, they still have a powerful influence. And then, on top of all that, you have modern formal markets that are growing and evolving. All three layers are active all at once.
So what you end up with is what experts call a hybrid model. You have the formal state-led policies and regulations, right? But the vast majority of food, especially for lower-income families, is still handled by these deeply entrenched informal systems. The local markets and traders that have been operating for generations.
And, one of the biggest challenges in this whole complex system is inefficiency, especially food waste. Globally, the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization estimates that 1.3 billion tons of food are lost or wasted every single year. That's food that is grown but never eaten, which is just a massive hurdle when you're trying to feed a growing population.
But look, understanding all this history and complexity isn't just some academic exercise. It's actually the key to unlocking the future. So for our final chapter, let's look at how this whole system can be transformed. Just look at this. The economic potential here is staggering. By 2030, Africa's food markets are projected to be worth over $1 trillion. This is not a small opportunity. It is absolutely monumental.
So what's driving this? Well, it boils down to four key things. First, Africa's incredibly young population. That's a massive source of energy and innovation. Second, women. who are really the backbone of small-scale farming. Third, growing trade within Africa, which is getting a huge boost from things like the African Continental Free Trade Area, designed to make it easier to trade across borders. And finally, a culinary revival, a growing interest in the continent's diverse and super healthy traditional diets.
Okay, so what's a real concrete step forward? This recommendation is crucial. It's a call to invest in understanding how these local informal markets, these so-called territorial markets, actually work. Because if we want to build better policies, we first have to truly understand the systems that are already on the ground, feeding millions of people every day.
And that leaves us with the final, most important question. The big takeaway here is that Africa's food systems aren't broken. They are the logical result of their own deep history. The challenge, and the incredible opportunity, is to understand those layers of heritage, disruption, and adaptation, and then ask ourselves, how can this rich, complex history become the very key that unlocks a more prosperous and sustainable future for everyone?